honor for me to now introduce you to my preferred Dutch, who lives also in Berlin, for the Virtual Happy Hour 3.0 presentation of Netherlands. And Jan Willem, I think it's your stage now, and we are very eager to learn more about your country. You're sharing the screens from your screen, isn't it? From your computer.
I will have a go. I'll do the desktop first, see if it works the same as Zoom. And I guess it does. Can you see the cows?
Oh, that's a beautiful picture. Oh, that's great. I want this as background for Teams.
What do you have, by the way, as background?
That's Frankfurt.
Frankfurt. You could have kidded me, because I was thinking, is that Chicago? Because I'm so in love with Chicago, but that comes back to this story. But anyway, I just, so inspiration bonding, small talk. It's also a bit random talk all over the place, just like these cows. Holland is by the looks of it looks green, but it's one of the most overpopulated countries. It has like 17 million people, and I lived amongst others in north of Milan, which is one of the most populated areas. But also when you come to the so-called Randstad, the four cities, Utrecht, Rotterdam, Amsterdam, and The Hague, it's very, very populated. Not as India, for example, on the streets, but Holland is obviously very, much smaller. So anyway, it's a bit of a challenge for me to do the Netherlands, because this is a touristic picture of my family and me some time ago, because we left Holland 20 years ago. And how I'm going to try to explain about my culture leading up to the Corona period is just take you through my life in these different countries, and also how the Dutch are perceived in those countries, and just make some random thoughts about this. Right. So that's what I was thinking of.
Are you wearing wooden shoes at the moment?
Yeah, I'm a size 95. So yeah.
And by the way, can you click down the video you see on the right-hand side? Because we are now sharing. Yeah.
You see you stop sharing. Hang on.
Yeah, exactly.
There it is. Okay, good stuff. Right. So what's in the name? So this guy is called Willem Alexander. So he's our king. What you see with people born around my age, so this starts really all the way back in 1968. You see people with double names and a dash. So my name is Jan-Willem, and this guy is Willem-Alexander. So it was a fashion apparently to call people out with double names. It doesn't always work, especially in America. Calling yourself Jan, it becomes a Jan, and then you're a girl. In Germany, Willem with an H also doesn't sound too nice. And then the other funky thing is, people always ask, how do you spell your last name? Luiters? Well, you don't. Right, so it's impossible, because we have this weird way of spelling words with the U and the I, the U and the I and the J. There's no difference in the sound. The O and the E, and so on, as you can read here. So our names are pretty weird. But what is significant for people of my generations, you see a lot of double names. Netherlands, Holland, or the Dutch. You clearly said the Netherlands. That's also what the Dutch government wants to do. Is they want to promote it as a marketing gig. It's not Holland, because Holland is North and South Holland. It's like two provinces in the country, and then people confused as well with what's this Dutch, and especially the Americans. You mean Deutsch? But in fact, the English people used the word Dutch in the past to describe people from both the Netherlands and Germany. But you probably will hear me say Holland every now and then, because that's just how I'm educated, just like this guy. By the way, it shouldn't be a presentation. Just feel free to interrupt me or anything, or ask questions. Right. So anyway, this is where
I just want to say we call the Netherlands Holland as South Africans, because Jan van Riebeeck was the first guy that was here, and he was from Holland. So we always say, is the Cape still Holland? So we don't use the word Netherlands.
Okay, I'm trying to follow because the line is pretty bad. Is it my line, guys? Can you hear me okay or? Okay. Yeah, it's interesting because I once had a project with South African Airways, and people, I thought I can follow the conversation, I can actually understand, but you don't understand, and yeah, you understand random words, but you can't really follow it. So, but still, because I was the IT provider, the people did start to whisper when I was around, with the Afrikaans part. So, right. So Marco, he's not here, unfortunately. He said, at least thing you need to do is show you a picture of you with hair. So here you go. My God, didn't that man ever have hair? Do you know from which movie that is?
No. Didn't that man ever have? No.
Back to the Future.
I don't know.
When Michael J. Fox goes back to the future and he meets his old teacher 20 years back, and he didn't have hair. But anyway, so this is purely for Marco. One of my first stops was in Greece. A fantastic period. What you see with the Dutch, they are obsessed by money. And they don't like, apparently, alcohol and women. So there was a Dutch guy who was trying to get the position at IMF, and he made a quote like, Eurozone countries wasted money on alcohol and women, and he was referring to Greece, Italy, and Spain and France. So that didn't go well. Also, what you see now with the Corona crisis, with the Euro bonds, the Dutch are again obsessed by money, and you can call that maybe they can do the debit and the credit and the numbers, high IQ, but sometimes, and that's what I learned over the past 20 years, the EQ is not always there. It's not that the Dutch are they are open-minded, but very adamant about themselves, and there's just certain things. Even though we tend to be very direct and we love being direct, there's certain things you just don't say and you just don't do, and that's one of the things I got confronted with over the past, and that's why, instead of those talkative extrovert Dutch as we used to be perceived in maybe the 70s, hippie time frame, it's now more offensive, ignorant, and arrogant.
But would you also come to the same conclusion while only living in the Netherlands, or was it for you also decisive to live in the US and Germany to exactly understand this perception? Or are the Dutch all have the same perception like you?
No, I think I learned this abroad. It's a good question that you ask. So here I'm obviously not in my 30s, but much younger. I had the dream always to travel. And maybe because as a kid I lived in the US, and Holland is just very small, and there's so much more out there in the world, that I thought, okay, there must be something more. When we moved as a family in our early 30s, we basically had enough of Holland due to the mentality of the people. It just wasn't us. It was a bit of a combination of both. We just were looking for the adventure. But I really learned more about the Dutch by living abroad. Yeah, during those 20 years. By the way, this was in Greece. This was for a few months. I traveled for 6 years from country to country without kids and everything. But my next serious this was actually also part of the adventure. I also worked in Austria, so opposite attracts. So the Dutch, as you know, Netherlands, so it's very low. There's no mountains, so we're obsessed by mountains. We like to cycle them, but most of all we like to go to Austria for skiing, or Switzerland. But in this case, I also worked in Austria. Then you find people like myself, so I'm 52, and they say, oh, I've been skiing 48 years. And you go like, how's that possible? So that's what the Dutch do. They like to brag, and they go, like to go on vacation, ski vacation, 1 week a year. And instead of saying 48 weeks, they say 48 years of skiing. So I worked in the ski resorts once for 4 months, but that only counts as 1 year. but you could also say I skied for 16 years because it was 16 weeks. So what the Dutch do is we all know, but although one of the things I learned whilst living in other countries is that there's also a great deal of German people and French people having caravans, but the Dutch seem to have the name. Now, I think what distinguishes the Dutch from the others is that before we go on vacation, we put our caravan full of food from the Dutch supermarket because it's cheap. Because we're always obsessed again by money. That's why many campsites don't really like to see the Dutch coming. So there they are with their caravan, and they bring their own food, and of course they will, get the milk and maybe the cheese, but that's about it. So very, very economical as always. So when we go to Italy, for example, we bring pasta, and who does that? Who doesn't appreciate the food? Well, if you come to Holland and you ask what is the Dutch cuisine, what is the Dutch kitchen, it's actually this one here is the most famous one where you get the food. For example, so here you get the food from a little box, little glass. You put €1 in, €2, and you get your food. It's really fast. But it's interesting because I always thought it was invented in Holland until I saw the Netflix series History 101. Not sure if any of you have seen it, but the first episode is about fast food, and it turns out that guess in which country this was invented?
Italy? No.
Netherlands.
Yeah, the US. So the whole fast food, it's really interesting. So it's called History 101. It's a documentary. The first series is about food and about McDonald's and the rest of it. But it starts actually with a picture of one of these things. In these glass houses, we do more than cultivating marijuana and other drugs. Typically, we do a lot of vegetables. So this is as per Michael Porter's economical theory. You take your disadvantage and you make it your advantage. So the Dutch weather is terrible, but they couldn't grow anything they wanted, right? But with these glass houses mimicking already back in the 50s or 60s, the climate of warmer countries, there's a massive export from Dutch vegetables, and of course. Again, it's cheap. So
what you're saying is exactly. I will never forget. I was once having a conversation with Transavia and Transavia France, and we were going to the Transavia France canteen, and I was in a Transavia Netherlands canteen. It was the worst airline canteen in the world. It was really like this. Some white meat sandwiches and so on. It was, and especially for the French, it was like a cultural shock when they were in Amsterdam. And then I don't know what it was for the Dutch when they were in Transavia France canteen. Was maybe a big waste of everything, but it was such a big difference to these two countries for the food.
Yeah, it's classic. And to be honest, I love the canteen of Transavia. So I worked for Capgemini for 2 years for Transavia, and I worked in the hangar. And we had this fantastic all these snack food. I think I gained 5 kilos in a year or something. It was classic. And I can tell you what we as the Dutch think when we go to Air France, because I worked and I come to that shortly for Amadeus multiple years out of Nice, and I did the Air France KLM project going there 2 years. Every Friday we were summoned in Paris. Air France bought KLM, so KLM always had to fly to the French headquarters. The KLM guys didn't really mind, because what they would do for a 2-hour meeting, they would come the day before, sleep in Paris, and leave the day after for a 2-hour meeting. But anyway, and then I do recall that one day I used to just join the Dutch for lunch, and we were looking at our plates, and I was like, what is that? And that was like sheep's head or something, and we were disgusted. And then vice versa, the one of a few occasions that the guys would come back to Amsterdam, the French on their side would be disgusted looking at this glass of milk and this sandwich. So it's still a miracle how Air France and KLM are together, I think. So, but anyway, the Dutch food culture.
This is kind of funny. So my wife Annika, her best friend is married to a Dutch guy, and they live in Finland. And guess what he does for a living? He builds greenhouses.
Really?
Yes, yes. They have huge greenhouses for tomatoes and cucumbers and other things that you can't grow because of the growing season in Finland. So yeah, his business is to build these greenhouses up there.
Yeah. Oh, sorry, you call them greenhouses, not glass houses. Yep. Oh no, that's a great idea. Yeah, I recall first time on vacation in Finland, trying to buy some normal food at the age of 14, but there was hardly anything. I do recall still two words. One is ranskalaiset perunat, which is French fries, and the other one is valioja taloa, which is ice cream. So, but otherwise I don't speak too much Finnish. It is a trait of the Dutch, I think, to speak languages. And as I said, this question is random. Our language is a big mixture of English, Germanic, but also from Latin languages. So the Dutch, they do speak their languages, but it's not that they speak them very fluent. But they also like to brag with it. But obviously, it's also common when you go abroad as a Dutch person to a larger country. You know, it's easier to speak the language than vice versa, or you're actually forced to do so.
But the funny thing is, a German, if the Dutch speaks slowly, listen carefully, you can understand it actually.
Yeah. We have to be careful always, because when it's indeed people from Köln, Cologne, or but also in Berlin, the people understand us. When we go, and we lived in Bavaria as well, then it's much harder, I think, for the locals. But especially close to the Dutch border, it's pretty damn close. So.
But come on, lekker meisje is totally different than nice lady. So that's I don't understand any Dutch.
Well, lekker.
Lekker is very South African.
It could be a maiskolben, and then I'm on the wrong path, maybe.
Yeah. That's true. Did you ever hear Marco speak Dutch?
Really? Wow, he never told me. Really, I thought he speaks Italian and German and Greek, but okay, I will ask him for Dutch.
Yeah, no, but it's not that he speaks it fluent, but he knows around 400 words, but he pronounces them fluent.
Oh.
It's really funny.
How did you learn all this?
How I learned the hard way. So what Marco used to do, and I hope we're no longer recording this. No, but in Air Berlin, we shared an office, and the first thing he would do every morning and we would be facing the cabin crew office, and he would open the window and he would always say "Hallo meisjes," which is basically "Hi girls" in fluent Dutch. And that was my first day in the office, but he did it until the last day, even though it was snowing or raining, because they were always smoking outside. And that's how I found out all these terms. Anyway, food, Holland. No, I think if you go to Holland for food, you end up in Italian restaurants, not run by Italians, by any other culture, because Holland is here you go again. The Netherlands is a melting pot. But the first restaurants we had were Chinese when I was young, and that was really a treat. Otherwise, you were ending up eating from these glass things. Right. This is an interesting period. So after Italy, we moved to another country that I will save for last. But we also lived in France. The Dutch and the French are on opposites. So we had this book shown before. You can't see me, right? The culture map. And you can see opposites. So the French and the Dutch are really opposites. And I learned a lot from the French, and I ended up buying a book, Why 60 Million Frenchmen Can't Be Wrong. And I also, what it made me realize why 17 million Dutch always think they're right, because we're pretty adamant about ourselves. But maybe that's also because we have this syndrome that we are a small country and we always have to fight up towards the big ones. This Calimero syndrome. but we just like to be right. So a small anecdote: when I worked in France, I ended up in a small conflict with someone because we were talking about a project plan, and I kept on asking questions. And my French colleague, actually a friend, asked me, "Why are you so suspicious?" He said, "Why are all Dutch so suspicious?" In writing, in an email. And I kind of didn't feel offended, but I had to react. I said, "Well, because all French are so inefficient. Because why is the price of milk twice as expensive in France than in other countries?" Unfortunately, that email went up pretty high, and I got called by the number one of Amadeus why I thought the French were inefficient, and that wasn't the point. It was more of a joke. But it is an interesting thing, again, for the Dutch to always think about the price. So the word you hear with us is always cheap, and you go to a supermarket and you think, hang on, it's the same cow. So why is that €2, and why is it 70 cents in our place? So other than Calimero.
Flavor about this Air France KLM partnership then? Because the perception is totally different then from both sides.
Which perception?
Yeah, because Air France KLM, if you say the Dutch always believe they are right and the French are the larger country, but still they're having a joint company in aviation.
Yeah, money talks, people listen, and it's a good match. I mean, the Dutch, again, with the money, they had their massive pension fund, so they're pretty healthy, and it's of course also about the route network. It's at least the better. Sorry, go ahead.
I thought it also differed between the passenger side and the cargo side. When you go, for example, to the cargo side of Air France KLM, it's totally ruled by KLM, and all the cargo-related meetings usually take place actually in Amsterdam, not in Paris. So that's how I put it. When I was working for IATA, when we had cargo meetings with Air France KLM, they always were taking place actually in Amsterdam, and that's also where Sky Cargo has their headquarters basically. So was a bit different than on the passenger side.
Yeah, that could be true. I learned one of the things I learned was in Amadeus. So I worked for Amadeus airline IT company, a PSS system, and one of my biggest learning experience was the Air France KLM project. It was right after the merger, and Air France basically was somewhat forced to go with Amadeus just because of the legacy and the rest of it. KLM was bought by Air France, so didn't have much of a choice. We tended to say the only thing they had in common was the enemy, and that was us as IT provider. But at the end, it worked all well because Amadeus they were proud, right? Air France and KLM had built their own system, and they had to give that up. But at the end, it worked out very well because Amadeus is obviously a fantastic company with a great system. But it was very interesting to see to run these steering kind of committees. And our management thought it was good to put a Dutch guy in front of this. But the biggest conflict I actually had was not with Air France, but with KLM. So anyway, it's also our model, right? We go head on. People perceive that as direct, and as I said at the beginning, there is the part of emotional intelligence that's I think we are now getting better in, so to speak. Anyway, we're not only small, it's not all bad, we're also apparently statistically the tallest population, although every time I go to Scandinavia or I walk around in Berlin, I don't feel myself as taller than the average Joe. So that was our period in France, was actually 7 years. Then going from France to the US, where we lived 5 years, it felt like a warm bath. So the Americans and the Dutch, they get along. And I'm not talking about politics here or the current president. It's just in general. And this guy says, make America big. So I don't want to be just negative about Holland, but I'm very cynical, which is also reflective for the way how we think. So Holland actually for such a small country, has produced quite a few successful things. I have just saw the Heineken bottle already at the beginning. KLM, the oldest airline, still out there. Shell, Philips, and below the Royal Dutch, even though the Queen is from Argentina. And the DJs. So at some point in time, there were like in the top 10 DJs, there were seven Dutch guys. Probably has something to do with the drug scene, something with the party scene. But for such a small country, Holland Netherlands did quite a few big things. All right, here we go. Yeah, this is my favorite. So we lived in Germany for 3 years, close to Munich, in Erding, and we live now in Berlin almost for 5 years. In Holland, we have a special relationship with Germany because it's a neighboring country, and by default you take the piss. One of the things we tend to believe is that the Germans don't make jokes. So this is actually one of the most successful commercials over years, where a couple tries to buy a car, and they ask the guy seriously, and the German salesman from Opel says, Germans don't make jokes. I found out the hard way when people like the guy who's laughing now and the others, the sense of humor in Germany is just amazing. So the WhatsApps, and they're really good. They're not too tough. I think this one, there was some sort of conflict at some point in time, but anyway, I found out that's not true. So one of the things I learned, that we in Holland are wrong. We think we're cynical. We think we're all Monty Python, but the German part is pretty damn good as well. When I got interviewed for a potential job at Air Berlin, you're a bit nervous, and you get back then there wasn't Zoom. This is 5 years ago or something, 4 years ago. Zoom or Microsoft Teams, it was still WebEx, so you had to dial in a number. And I was in Holland at that time, and the guy interviewing me knew. So. I look at my invitation, and I'm in a holiday resort in a park, the Efteling, and I look at the number, and it says, if you're in Germany, the world champion, this number. If you're in the Netherlands, not the world champion, dial this number. So I was like, seriously? So I dialed the number, and the first thing the guy on the other side asks, did you see the bridge number? And my first sentence during the interview was, you fucking bastard. So that didn't well. But then Marco Contento decided to hire me anyway. So that's how I ended up with Air Berlin, thanks to Marco, and that's why we're in Berlin. By the way, what do tulips have to do with this? Like I said, a random conversation. Tulips don't come from Holland, actually. They seem to be someone took the bulbs from Turkey and then planted them, and then the climate in Holland was good, and now the Dutch are famous for tulips. Anyway, 2 lessons learned: tulips from Turkey.
The first bubble ever. The first stock exchange bubble was the tulip bubble.
Yeah, was it?
They were traded that high. I think they were worth more than gold at one point, and then it all went. Yeah, you can read about it, or you need to watch Wall Street, then you know about it as well.
Yeah. So interesting. I don't know if anybody knows it, but I watched an episode about financial bubbles, and the first financial bubble occurred in the Netherlands when people sold bulbs as futures.
Yeah, that's what I meant, basically, MG. That was the first financial bubble, was about the bulbs of tulips.
Correct. Yeah.
See, comes back to money again. Right. I'm not sure if this picture is politically correct, so maybe not. The recording stopped anyway. All right. So we spoke about languages and the Dutch speaking a few. So the reason why my generation speaks German is merely because of two things. First, when you go on vacation as a kid, and back then, you didn't go on a plane. You went to your own coast, and what did you find on your own coast and your own lakes? Like thousands of Germans. So as a kid, then you try to buy a comic book, but you can't because it's all in German. But you still want to buy a comic book, so you end up buying a German comic book in Holland, and that's how I started to read German. The second reason is TV. In Holland, we had two channels, and they would start only at 7 p.m. or something silly. Nothing during the day, and it would finish at 11. But then we had in German TV 3 channels, including Sportschau, 6:05 every Saturday. Every Dutch person, because everybody loves football, would be watching TV or watching Derek in the evening. And then you have also Dutch guys like this, Rudi Carrell, who speaks German. Well, he used to speak German the same as I speak it, with a very heavy Dutch accent. So, but we pick it up pretty fast. But if you look at the detail, we're not too great at it. By the way, a funny thing in Holland, and it's reflected on Dutch TV. It's not like ARD and ZDF or BBC or Tele France, where you have like one fits all. Holland is built into something almost like the cast in India, but then the level is more or less the same. So you have still a channel for the socialists, for the liberal, so another a channel, a company, let's say, who broadcast on the national channel. So you have the socialists, the liberalists, the Catholics, the Protestants, the evangelists, and then the extreme socialists, not communists, but like anarchists almost. So, and that's what you see all through the Dutch society still, also for sports clubs. Of course, in Germany you also have, for example, a Christian club, but there it goes all the way into television land, and that's why maybe the quality is not that great. Obviously now we have commercial TV, so.
Oh yeah. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
So football is for the Dutch one of the most important things. And this is what happened in 1990. What it also shows, so there was a bit of a conflict during that game, and it was a typical Dutch game. They had the best players ever probably, and they couldn't make it just because they could not work together as a team, because they found themselves more important than the team was. And this is something we probably secretly always admired from the German football. What it also shows is the sense of humor. So this is a Dutch fabricant of something you eat for breakfast, and they have this ad with like, how can you get them together? So these guys, they really hated each other, but for this picture they are together. What is interesting, there's a group in Holland. I still have 6 friends. We met each other when we were 8, and we are still seeing each other either via Zoom or when I go to Holland, we're going to visit them. Most important is we played football together. And there's a part of a song that says, I didn't have any friends because I didn't know how to play football. So as a boy, back in that generation, it was so important. And therefore, probably every Dutch, but like many other countries, obviously, the Dutch are obsessed with football. By the way, that group of people that we have, we have a WhatsApp group, and it's called the World's Most Irritating. And every month we have a new picture. I think we started off with Lothar Matthäus. Then we had Effenberg, Völler, Beckenbauer, and we're now with Müller. So, but anyway, that shows how we think. But in all honesty, and this is also one of the things I learned on the sports of the beauty of football. is that since, I think, 2004? When was it when Klinsmann was the coach?
Yeah, 6.
2006. Okay. Yeah, since then, because we were always bragging and loving the Dutch football, but since 2006, we actually have to, some of us who live abroad can acknowledge that German football is so nice to watch since 2006.
And
so
the song
big
you
change.
are referring to is this Ohne Holland fahren wir zur WM, ohne Holland fahren wir zur WM? No?
Just whilst I was trying to be nice. Yeah. So yeah. Let's move on. No, there's plenty of. Now, to be honest, I don't listen too much to local radio and TV, and
Good.
yeah, and I think nobody's going to the AM now, unfortunately. Anyway,
But
so
was 74 not the bigger heartbreaker for to lose this final against Germany?
yeah, I was 6. I do know, I do recall a few things. One of them was that my father threw an ashtray at the TV. He didn't smoke, but he found the ashtray. Yeah, that apparently is deeper in the wounds of people than anything else that happened in history. Depends on the generation. So I was 6. I recall more the 78 one with Argentina. But obviously, having spent a lot of time with grandparents, you get and your parents, you get to know how important apparently 74 was. But that's still iconic, I think, when you watch that back. So regardless, 74 or 88, everybody likes to dress in orange. They go mad. So Willem van Oranje, that's where the name comes from. It's also in the royal name of Oranje Nassau. But we are pretty nationalistic. Just like anyone, many other countries. Since 1988, I can't claim it to be true, but since 88, many other countries started to dress up in their national color. And I think it was in 88 when Holland won the Europe Cup. The only thing we ever won, was in Germany. And that's where the orange hype started. And now we're exaggerating, so it doesn't matter if we play darts or volleyball, or if we win something, everybody goes bananas, watches TV, and starts dressing in Holland. So there's actually thousands of people playing darts for several years, since 15 years ago or something. The Dutch started to win some darts tournaments in England.
But you guys also have a reason that our carrots are orange.
Do we have another reason than just sports?
Sorry?
Sorry, the line is breaking. Can you please repeat?
I said you also have a reason that our carrots are orange and not purple like they used to be.
Yep, maybe. We do give the carrots to the horse of Santa Claus, which is something I left out, because Santa Claus comes with, other than that is white, a horse eats the carrots. He also comes with something which is called the black Piet, but that's something that was normal for Zwarte Piet. Yeah. It's a bit. I'm a bit conflicted, because I like I said, I didn't live in Holland for 20 years, and I always thought that the guys were black because they climbed through the chimney, and even if they wouldn't climb from the chimney, as a kid you grow up and it's all funny. And I loved Zwarte Piet, but now it's discrimination, and I also understand where that comes from. But looking at a distance where sometimes the Dutch make a big fuss about something, it's hard to grasp. But then again, I don't live there for a long time. So the reason why we're here is this bloody Corona. I've been cynical about the Dutch, and I've been cynical about politics, and I spoke about EQ. One of the other things the Dutch are, even if it doesn't involve money, is pragmatic. So there was a minister of health at the start of the Corona crisis who collapsed. He was overworked, he was sick, and he couldn't take it anymore. The Dutch government is run by more conservative liberal And so, you know, they had to find the Minister for Health from either of those parties. There was a super candidate from the Socialist Party, which wasn't elected. But the Dutch are, at that moments like this, pragmatic, maybe also without emotion, and just taking the best guy there is for the job. So that certain things do make me proud. On the other, so that's one of the things that I think strikes out for Corona. For the rest, it's I think we're bombarded with news. Personally, I've had enough of you know, watching the statistics and comparing countries like football scores and the rest of it. I'm not sure about other countries, but the thing I like is this lady who speaks with her hands and to translate what deaf people can't hear, so the deaf language. And I'm not sure what the German word. I had to look it up. Is it horten? Or hoarding. Now in Holland it's called hamsteren, but every time, and this word hamsteren, especially with the toilet paper.
Hamster. It's German.
Yeah. So it was so nerve-wracking, and this was right at the beginning, and people were scared and frustrated and everything. But then this one went viral, where this woman just makes the hamster moves. You should watch the video. It's actually pretty funny. So. Anyway, that wraps up more or less around the world how I discovered Holland from the other side.
That's really fantastic. I'm really amazed because I doubt that you can read all this in any kind of cultural book or whatever. And I'm really impressed from the, let's say, how blunt you are describing your country. And I'm really, as I said, you're my most preferred Dutch, because you're also living in the best city of the world, of course. No, I'm amazed.
Yeah, it was a pleasure. I think one of the things, and all of you, I think, worked for international companies, and that helps as well, right? Where you get to meet people and get to learn what to say and what not to say. And for example, a Swedish ex-colleague of mine got into discussion with a current colleague of mine from Oklahoma. And it was moving towards politics, and it wasn't just moving; it ended up in politics. And this was a work dinner. I mean, oh my God! But this is one of those things that you learn. And also, and it's interesting to see with the Americans as well. And really, we shouldn't be talking about Trump, but it's very hard to judge if you don't live in the country. And that's what I try to explain to my fellow countrymen who've been on vacation to Germany or have been on vacation in Italy. It's only when you live in a country that you can truly, you know, say something. You're entitled to have an opinion about the people or the culture.
Girish, you are planning to move to Netherlands, isn't it? From Germany to Netherlands.
No, Daniel, that's the wrong information you have gotten.
Okay. I'm glad that you want to stay in the country of the world champion and not go to the Orange County. Sorry.
I'm very happy with where I am right now.
The country of the future world champion.
I'm always the meat guy here.
I don't think we will be world champion, but
are there any questions from the audience to our Dutch presenter? Don't be shy. That's the thing that's what I am reading also in this cultural map. I think the Dutch are the most direct in terms of conversation. I'm in this book of cultural map. It says even in a meeting, in a business meeting, you're really offending your colleague, and later on you go for coffee in the cafeteria. So you can really shoot him any question in a very bluntly direct manner. Everything you wanted to. Now it's the time to ask questions.
I have to apologize. I have to drop off.
Is there something you want to know from a real Dutch? Mauritius is freezing. Christine from Canada.
Yeah, so Jan, hello.
Hi, Kristen.
Excellent presentation. What is your most favorite memory from, if I understand correctly, you grew up in the Netherlands, yes?
Yes.
Okay. So aside from your 6 friends who've been friends with since you were 8 years old playing football, what is your most favorite memory of growing up in the Netherlands that you don't think you would have experienced in all the other countries in which you lived? It can be the most remarkable, the weirdest, anything that really just stands out.
Oh, that's a tough question, Christine.
I love asking questions.
Yeah, that's a really interesting one because I had so many. It's weird, but maybe also because I'm weird. So I moved
Weird
to.
Is good.
When I was 8, I moved to Gainesville, Florida, of all places, for a year.
Oh, wow.
And since I got on that Boeing, I just wanted one thing: is just go away. And all the fun I had was most of the fun I had was abroad. Let's say so moments that stick in my memory. So it's let me make an analogy. It's a little bit like when you go to Kenya on a safari and you are going into, you want to see the giraffe and the elephant and the lion, and then those are the key moments and success. Whilst I was told you have to enjoy the safari even if you don't see the animals. It's the big picture. And I think that's with Holland. The big picture for me is still the friends and the family, and especially in difficult times like this, and maybe also because of the age. So something I couldn't care less about 30 years ago, 20 years ago, of going back to Holland. Now I cherish that. So it's not so much one moment, it's more the friendship and the family in general.
Do you still feel like that's your home, or is home wherever you are?
Home is Europe.
Okay.
It's one of the things, even though we loved Chicago, and there are days that we think, shit, why didn't we stay? Because we love it so much. But we also, for a reason, probably went back to Europe, and just the diversity of the cultures. That I think we tend to say European. And if you live in a place like Berlin, I mean, you don't really know, except you bump into the likes of Daniel Stecher every now and then.
Having a right punch, no doubt.
Yeah, no, but it's fantastic. Berlin is a melting pot, and just for people like Daniel, and I think it's people like us that you find in this city. I think it's a good reflection of Europe.
Do you go sometimes to Potsdam, to this Dutch quarter?
I do go to Potsdam, but only to cycle. So I cycle towards Potsdam and then back. It's like a 60K tour or something, just for training. But I've heard about it, but never went.
So Jan, that was I love the answer about being European, even though you love Chicago, and obviously I can empathize a little bit now living over here. So since Kristen asked, a relatively direct pointed question to a direct person, I shall ask. You were somewhat humble about talking about your athletic accomplishments until just 2 minutes ago when you talked about just not even breathing hard on a 60 km trip to Potsdam and back. But so do you think your achievements in football and your athletic things are due to your Dutch upbringing, or is that from being around the world and seeing different sports?
The Dutch upbringing starting point, because my father used to be a soccer coach. So the moment I could walk, I was there with a ball. And it's interesting what you said, because in Gainesville at the age of 8, there's not much to do there, except there was a university where my father was also a soccer coach, and all the sports. And I got obsessed by anything that moved, from hockey to basketball to football to baseball. So definitely something that inspired me. Well, it is basically my father who brought me on the football field, and ever since. And I just need it, right? It goes a little bit into an extreme when you do an Ironman, but then again, it's a good especially in times like this, just going out there for 1.5 hour, empty your head. It's needed.
Yeah.
Especially when you were running steering committees at Air Berlin, it's definitely needed.
Yeah, those were classic. So for those of you who don't know John and I, that's where we met, and we were total utter enemies in terms of companies, but obviously not as humans.
So we have Daniel from Colombia in the call, and I once remember I was in Bogota, and a guy who had the farm of roses explained me that most of the roses from his farm is transported for the St. Valentine's Day to the Netherlands, and then from there to the rest of Europe. So Daniel, do we have something in common with the Dutch, or is it completely different? You are mute, I think. You are mute.
As you say, the flowers are the link with the Netherlands, and we have many flowers exchanged with the Netherlands for a long time. Actually, I know somebody who is doing business with Netherlands related with flowers.
And Anuja, you share the cows with the Netherlands, isn't it? Because I think the opening picture were many cows. So I think India has also plenty of cows.
Yeah, there are. Thank you, and it was a wonderful presentation. Netherlands is one country I have visited most number of times as a tourist, and I love the way they have inclusion towards diversity. Like they are more welcoming the tourists, unlike all other Schengen states. I have felt that they're most welcoming for other cultures or other communities. So that way, I really felt Amsterdam is a good place for tourists.
And last year, when we had our Ops 2020 in July, I was asking the 3 colleagues from KLM whether we can make the next Ops 2020 in Amsterdam, which would be exactly this year. But unfortunately, COVID-19 is not making it possible to have an on-site or in-person Ops 2020. But because we made a nice boat tour in Berlin, and I thought when you come to Amsterdam, going through the Grachten would be perfect for all the attendees to experience Amsterdam.
True. And the shoe that you have shown in the beginning, is it a moving one, or it's just there are different shoes? Because I also have the same picture, but the background was completely different. So I had this doubt in mind.
Yeah, I think it was in Delft where they sell on a market square, wooden shoes. It wasn't a moving, just like a publicity kind of thing. So, yeah, classic. Yeah, we came from the US, so we felt like tourists.
Also the Holland bike, because I think that's also pretty known that the Netherlands bike, or to use this kind of bike in your country, because I think that's also pretty common to go with a bike through Amsterdam, isn't it?
Yeah, through Amsterdam or through Holland, because there's no hills. There's just a bit of wind every now and then. There's more bicycles than there is cars. And one of the things that shocked me actually, because again after coming back to Amsterdam every now and then, was in my days they would be staggered all over the ground where you see them parked everywhere, and now they actually have a tower of bicycles where there's like a system to move them up. In Berlin, I drive such a Hollandraad. It comes from Bremen, and I bought it at Konrad in the Speicherstraße. So you see them everywhere, but it's a German brand.
Awesome. Yeah. So Christine, I tried to convince you to make a Canada presentation. You can maybe sleep over one more night, and then I would like to have you on the list, because Canada is still missing in our country list, because at the end, all the people here are somehow presenting their country, except John, because France was already on the list. And I think Anuja is somehow already taken for Virtual Happy Hour 3.5, presenting Germany being an Indian. So we have plenty of ideas about that.
Right.
Well, that's one of the reasons why I was asking Jan the question, and I've been taking notes because I see the very long list of countries being presented, and Canada is nowhere on there. And I am, if nothing else, Canadian. So as much as it feels like homework, yes, I would be very happy to do that, perhaps in July.
Perfect. But please also include this one game where Germany won against Canada in hockey. It was
that
last.
never happened. That
Yeah,
never happened. That's fake news.
Oh no.
No, sorry,
No.
I have no memory of that.
And I remember how I was texting to Steve Bogie and Kevin O'Connor, yeah, we won and so on. And then I think some weeks later was the World Championship. And then I think Canada won 7-1. The dream was over. But I remember it was, I don't know, 20 years ago, there was a 3-3 Canada-Germany. And then there was a penalty shooting and the puck was really staying on the line. And so that's for us Germans to play against Canada is always a big challenge.
Hockey is a huge thing here. And when you were talking about the soccer rivalries, for lack of a better word, going forward, often you'll walk into the office during the NHL playoffs and see someone wearing a jersey you know they would not be caught dead in. Well, they lost a bet and their team lost. So, and for us, a big rivalry is with Boston, the Boston Brewers, because the original 6 teams in the NHL, Boston and Montreal have been rivals for, since the early 1900s. So yes, I will speak about that as well. But the World Hockey Championships are also a heck of a big deal.
And we were talking about books. You were mentioning, Jan, the Cultural Map. Another great book to read is McMafia. I don't know whether you know this book. Mm-mm. But it is also speaking about Canada to be the largest marijuana exporter in the world.
Marijuana?
That's really
a fantastic ignorance.
It is. It describes that let's say all the they are the doorkeeper and so on because they come from the wrestling, and that's then also describing that in the woods of Canada, people are planting the marijuana. And you cannot find it. Even if you go with a helicopter and try to identify all this, it's not possible because the country is so large. And that's something where Canada is unofficially known for to be the big exporter for marijuana in the world.
Wow, I was not aware of that. And although now since October 2018, 19, 17, it's legal now. I can't remember. I remember having to put it in the manual. I actually had to publish a drug policy in the technical manual I used to write. It was the weirdest thing. Yeah. So yes, the exports and imports, I noted that. I guess the illegal ones would be of interest as well, right? Even perhaps more of interest. Yeah.
So in hockey, can I ask a question on the hockey?
Yes.
So one of the things that shocked me in a positive way was I attended only one rugby game ever in my life, and it was between France and England. And my English colleague went to Marseille with me with his English jersey on, and I thought he wanted to commit suicide. Because I just visited a football game in Marseille where PSV Eindhoven was playing Olympique Marseille, and you had really be careful not to show you were Dutch and the rest of it, because you get your head bashed in. So, and he said, no, this is rugby. And indeed, he gets off the bus and it's all hugging and stuff. So how's that in with ice hockey? Is that you hit each other's head in, or is it like friendly?
No, it's very friendly. I mean, There have been times when there are a few years ago, 5 or 6 years ago, I don't remember his name, but one of the Boston players, he was Eastern European. He slashed, and it was and he got a penalty, and I think he got fined and kicked out for a few games. A really, really nasty move on someone that severely jeopardized someone's neck. And that got a little heated, especially in social media pages and in the office, but generally face to face talking about hockey. I mean, I've never seen people come to blows over it. We don't have, what do they call them in England? The hooligans?
Yes.
That will go and beat each other up outside stadiums. I've never seen that. But I've seen, at one point, one team, their home games, they were throwing something like octopus onto the ice or something. So every few years, something very bizarre will happen. But in general, it's heated discussion. And obviously, we believe we are the best in Montreal because we are, although they have not won a cup since 93 or 94. It's generally pretty friendly, really heavy ribbing, if you will.
Yeah. So, Kristen, I'm from Minnesota, so I I grew up playing hockey and know the original six. And yeah, the octopuses are a Detroit tradition where they throw octopuses.
Detroit. Okay, that was just really strange.
So yeah, but I said no, it'd be interesting to see the Canadian presentation being adjacent to you growing up and playing hockey through university against many Canadians. So it'll be fun to watch.
Absolutely. Yeah, no, hockey was definitely, and you guys were speaking earlier about not, if you don't live in the country, I'm paraphrasing, Jan, I apologize, Jan. If you don't live in the country, you shouldn't, or perhaps not well versed in the politics. I feel incredibly versed in U.S. politics for the fact that it's more interesting than Canadian politics, I'm sad to say, and it takes over the World Forum on a, when my father used to call me every morning to wake me up, and when he called me the day after the last election, I said a very bad word. I don't believe you. It's not true. And for the fact that we are actually heavily impacted by U.S. politics for what's the embargoes and things like that. Yeah, so there'll be some discussion of that. Like we're sister countries, or family countries, if you will.
Yes.
Yes.
Although I now identify with the French more than the U.S.
Really? Well,
yes.
my family. I'll give a little precursor. My family. I guess I'll talk about this too. My last name is Bigras or Bigras, and my family came from France in 1640 something. And I believe our first relative was an indentured servant. So he hired on, and the people he worked for paid his voyage across from France, and then had to pay it off. Had to work for a certain amount of years to pay it off. And then since then, every single Bigras in Canada is related to me, and there are many of them. And why is it that you identify more with the French as opposed to the English Canadians?
I live in France for the last 5 years.
You live in France now. See, that's what I didn't catch. Okay. Yes, but then you're supposed to make fun of Quebec French because our French is very different sounding.
Well, my English French is worse sounding, so don't worry about it. Don't worry about it. So yeah, and I think Jan working at Air Berlin, back to Jan, I think Jan understands the meaning of indentured servant, so that's good.
So I would say that was a fantastic Netherlands day. I learned so much, and thank you, Jan Willem, for that. I think that was exceptional, and I will upload the recording in the LinkedIn group and the Facebook group, and I think many people will be very jealous that they couldn't be here live with us.
Oh yes, definitely.
Absolutely.
Yeah. So I'm looking forward to the upcoming virtual happy hours, and fantastic. Thank you for that.
Thank you. Thank you all.
Thank you,
Daniel.
Thank you.
Thank you.
What is the Facebook page?